It was the robo-dancing entrance to Abbas Dancing Queen that made most of the headlines. A routine, along with her hour-long speech that was completed without being given a P45, losing her voice or the set collapsing behind her, that almost certainly gave Theresa May some breathing space. The immediate goal of the Tory Party Conference had been attained. She had come through the week relatively unscathed, had seen off the immediate threat of Boris Johnson and was safe in her job for a few more months at least. A low bar, maybe, but one that she had been by no means guaranteed to clear. But it was what Theresa May didn't say in her leader's speech that was perhaps the most significant. Not once during her references to Brexit did she mention the word checkers. She talked about the importance of getting a deal, reiterated her threat to walk away with no deal, and demanded the EU treat her and the UK with respect, all things that she knew would be uncontroversial and would appeal to the Conservative MPs and voters who were listening to her both in the hall and on TV back in their constituencies. Yet the word checkers didn't pass her lips. Now rewind a couple of weeks to the informal summit in Salzburg at which EU Council President Donald Tusk had declared Theresa May's checkers proposals to be completely unworkable. An hour after being given the verdict in private, the Prime Minister had given her own press conference at which she had managed to appear both furious and panic-struck. She had been humiliated in public and quite clearly had no plan B. Time and again she blindly repeated that the checkers deal was the only one on the table. Since then, the Prime Minister appears to have had a rethink. She has looked into the potential abyss of a no-deal Brexit that could lead to widespread chaos that the British public would never forgive her for. She has also stared into the eyes of the EU leaders and realized they weren't prepared to accept checkers without substantial compromises from the UK. So ever so quietly that it can't even be whispered out loud, checkers appears to have been watered down and modified so that it is almost unrecognizable from the deal that only a few weeks ago the Prime Minister declared was her best and final offer. Details of the proposed compromises being offered are sketchy at present but seem to center around the Northern Ireland backstop, the legal guarantee that whatever happens in future trade talks there will be no hard border on the island of Ireland. The UK now appears willing to remain in a de facto customs union for an indefinite period after the end of the transition in 2020, combined with Northern Ireland remaining aligned with EU on the regulation of some goods, thereby necessitating extra checks between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Brett Kavanaugh is too emotional for politics. Suddenly the mood music between the EU and the UK has changed. Where previously there was only doom and gloom, with EU leaders insisting that the two sides were still miles apart on the crucial, tricky 20% of the agreement that had yet to be agreement, now the Irish Foreign Minister, Simon Coveney, is saying the deal is 90% done and that he expects the remaining 10% to be finalized in the next 2 months if both sides are pragmatic and act in good faith. So now we are in new, unexpected territory. One where it looks easier for the UK and the EU to find a mutually acceptable agreement than for the Prime Minister to get the UK Parliament to ratify it. Ironically, right now it's just possible that Theresa May has more friends in Brussels than she does in the House of Commons. Since her disastrous election campaign of 2017, Theresa May has had to rely on the votes of the DUP to give her an overall majority in Parliament. These votes will disappear if the compromise deal gets put to a vote, as the Irish Unionists would never accept any deal that treats Northern Ireland differently from the rest of the UK. The government would also face a rebellion by the hardline Eurosceptics of the European Research Group, who would be unable to accept any Brexit deal that maintained a customs union for an indefinite period of time that would keep the UK as a rule-taker from the EU and would impact the UK's ability to sign free trade agreements with other countries. That would leave the government reliant on Labour votes to get its deal through Parliament. While the Labour Party would almost certainly be whipped to vote against the deal, Labour's 6 tests have been purposefully calibrated to ensure Theresa May has little chance of meeting them. There will be some MPs who will be tempted to vote with the government. These are MPs, such as Caroline Flint and Gareth Smell, who represent constituencies that voted to leave, and fear that voting down a deal would be seen as a betrayal of the 2016 referendum result. And it is to these MPs that Theresa May has been reaching out in her recent appeals to come together in the national interest, yet the simple fact remains is that there is no clear agreement on what the national interest is. A compromised bad deal, which is one the Prime Minister is offering, that doesn't really give anyone what they want? A no deal that leaves Britain crashing out of the EU on World Trade Organization terms? Or a second referendum that would give the country another chance to remain in the EU? Theresa May is going nowhere, so brace for a no-deal Brexit. The country appears to be more divided than it was before the first referendum. As ever, it will all come down to the numbers. And right now not even the Chief Whip knows how to count. When push comes to shove, just how many members of the IRC will vote against their own party when the alternative might be a no-confidence vote and a general election that Labour might win? And would Labour MPs be forgiven for voting with the Tories and keeping them in power? Negotiating with the EU could just have been the easy bit. The parliamentary vote will go down to the wire. Like this? Now read, Theresa May is going nowhere, so brace for a no-deal Brexit. Why Jeremy Corbyn's bitterness could lose Labour in electio no-deal Brexit or remain? Why a second referendum is now essential.